Hi, Cutie Pies. This is Lanickia coming to you with this new show that's on Fox that I really enjoy. So I hope some of you are watching it as well. It's called The Prodigal Son. I don't know what day. I think it comes on Mondays at 9 o'clock, maybe. Anyways, it's on Fox. But so this is season 1, episode 1. It's the pilot. It's called the pilot, of course, because it's the pilot. So in 1998, Martin is talking to Malcolm. Now, Martin is the dad, and he's who they call the surgeon because he is a serial killer who has killed 23 people that they know of. And Malcolm is his son, and he is, I don't know if, I don't want to say he was grooming his son to take, to help him with killing the people because I'm not really sure, but he has a lot of affection and love for his son. So we see the day that he's arrested and everything. And he's just telling his son that to remember that I love you. And his wife is like, get him out of the house, because the police and everyone is there. So he leaves. So then we see in 2019, Malcolm is now working for the FBI. That's the little boy. He's grown up. He's working for the FBI now, and he's trying to catch a killer. And so he's out there trying to catch a killer, and he's working with this local sheriff's department, a police department. So they go in to catch this, the guy who is a serial killer, and his name is Claude. And when Malcolm goes in, they go in their separate rooms and everything, and he's attacked by the killer. And so what ends up happening is the killer knocks him out, and when Malcolm comes back to, he looks around and he sees that, the victims that they were, because the killer did have hostages that he had taken. He sees like their, where he's put their faces and heads in jars, and he sees where the other victims are still alive lying on the floor. And then he looks up and Claude is there. So he talks Claude out of killing him by just telling him, like, you're not a monster, you were created this way, because he was, I guess, a ward of the state. And so they sent him to this place, which was a slaughterhouse or whatever. And they pretty much, I guess, just trained, like, I don't know if the people there were so mean to him. I don't know what exactly happened, but Malcolm was like, you were made to be this way or whatever. You were not born broken. And so Clyde wants to hear more about this because I guess he felt like he was a monster. And so he wanted to hear more about this. And so Malcolm got him to lower the gun. And then the next thing you know, Claude is, you hear this gunshot ring off and Claude is lying on the floor. And it's because the sheriff has shot and killed Claude. And so Malcolm is just like, wait, he put his gun down, and the sheriff's like, no, he had it up or whatever. And Malcolm was like, no, he had his gun down. And he was like, the sheriff was just like, I just killed a serial killer. I'm a hero. And he was like, and Malcolm just tells him, no, you're a cold-blooded hero because, that's not the way you do it. Yes, you got a serial killer out or whatever, but that's not the way he wanted to go about doing it or whatever. So he was just upset about it, and the sheriff tells Malcolm, "I saved your life, son," and Malcolm punches him and lets him know, "I'm not your son." So then we see Malcolm is sitting with his, I guess, bosses, and he was like, "Listen, I know I shouldn't have punched the sheriff. I know it's unwritten, and it might be a written, but I know it's unwritten rule that you shouldn't do it." And they're like, "It is both." So they tell him that they have permission from did they say DOJ to, anyways, they're going to they fired him. And they tell him that he's like, I don't understand. Like, I saved those people. I caught Claude or whatever. And they was like, but you left, anyone who told you no, all that you left, you wreaked havoc along the way is pretty much what they said. Like, every cop hates you. And he's like, well, there's only like 4 good cops, so it's not that many, And they were like, you just caused destruction while you were doing it. And so they say, and we think you have, you ran into that building, and we think you have tendencies along, such as your father's. I think they said psychotic tendencies. And he says, Malcolm gets upset about this because he says the surgeon is not. Have y'all noticed that he never calls him dad? But anyways, he says the surgeon is not a social psychopath. He is a predator sociopath. And he says, I mean, you don't have to know, like, you shouldn't. I mean, why should you know that? Because it's only your job to know it. He started yelling at them. And he was like, and the next time you want to call somebody crazy, make sure you get their gun from them first. Because, you know, he still had his weapon, his firearm still on him and everything. So then we see, they flash back again and we see it's 2004, excuse me. I think that might say 9. It says 2004 9. I can't read my handwriting. But Malcolm has tremors when he has to tell his dad bad news. And so the news is that he's accepted a job with Quantico and that he's no longer going to have these. He's not, because he's been visiting his father up until this point. Malcolm has. They've been talking. He's just been trying to understand his dad and his mind and everything. And his dad, so they've been talking and doing all this while he was in college and everything. And so now Malcolm is wanting to go into the FBI. He's wanting to go and do that. And so he's telling his dad, I no longer need this. I'm not going to come by and see you again. And, you know, his dad saw the tremors and just told him, if you know, tell me something. So this is when we first see that Malcolm has developed tremors, especially when it's in regards to his father. So then we see Malcolm, okay, so Malcolm is dreaming, right? And he wakes up because in his dream, he's talking to his dad about having to leave, right? And so he turns around and he's trying to walk out and his dad says, no, you can't go. And he was like, this isn't right because I left. Because he hasn't spoken to his dad in like 10 years. So I think it is 2009, not 2004. My handwriting is horrible, sorry. So in his dream, he's trying to get out, but he can't. And then he wakes up. And we see when Malcolm wakes up that he has like restraints on both his wrist and he has a bite guard in his mouth. I guess because he has the night terrors and he might cause bodily harm to himself or something could happen. So he has to restrain himself as he sleeps at night. So to the bed. So he takes a lot of pills. So we see his morning routine, exercise, all that, and he takes a lot of pills. And then so then we see him walking. He tells his sister he got fired, and she tells him it's probably a good thing, you know, because he's dealing with, you know, he deals with what his father did, and then being a profiler, seeing all these serial murders and all of that kind of stuff is probably not good for your psyche. And as they're walking and everything, she gets a phone call and she tells him, he asks her, what is it? And she said, oh, it's nothing, just some kind of little story or whatever. And so, you know, she has to leave. So they leave each other. And then Gil, who we find out is a police officer for the NYPD, greets Malcolm. He walks up on Malcolm and everything. They're old. That's an old, I guess, mentor or something. At this point, we think it's like an old mentor or something to Malcolm. And so he asks Malcolm, you know, is everything okay? What's going on? And he just tells him, my sister just lied to me, you know, because he's a profiler. So he was like, she just lied to me and about work, and she doesn't want me to know she's working on a murder case. And Gil's like, oh, I'm sure she'll come to with you if she has anything. So at this point, then we see Gil tells Malcolm he needs his help working with the NYPD. And Malcolm says, well, you know, I got fired. And he said, well, that I work with the NYPD, so it's fine. Like, he, you know, so he's like, okay, I'll help, you know, because he enjoys this kind of work. And so that's when we meet Detective Danny. So we see her and they go in and she just tells them about the victim. She's riding up the elevator to the murder scene and she's telling Gil, you know, she's 43 years old. She comes from money. She's giving them the briefing of the victim, and he just takes the file of Malcolm Bright. Just takes the file from her, and she was like, "Who is this?" or whatever. Like, and he was like, you know, Gil was just like, someone you're not gonna like, you know, because Malcolm is just like, you could just tell even from this that he's one of those people that, he might, be happy-go-lucky, but he just does what he wants to do, and he gets on your nerves with it. So he was like, yeah, somebody you're not gonna like. So then we see her name is Vanessa. Her name is Vanessa, the victim. And she's older. She's 43, which she's not that. People call that getting up there in age, but it's 43. But so JT and Malcolm instantly don't like each other. Because JT says something about, she's the woman is, deceased or whatever. He tells about her as well, about, her money wise, health wise, and financial, excuse me, not financial, but age wise and everything. He was like, my type, and Malcolm is like, so you're into, I can't remember the word he says, but when someone likes dead, like gets sexually aroused by someone who's deceased, he was like, oh, so you're into that? And JT was like, who are you? So there again, Malcolm has, and we can see why he got fired, because if that's the way you were talking to all these different people, yeah. So then, Malcolm starts going over how she died from the killer's point of view, because that's how he thinks about the profiler, of course. So he goes over it from that point of view, and he realizes, so in doing all of this, he realizes that it's a copycat of the surgeon. So whoever is doing this is doing a copycat of his father's murders and everything. And so Gil just asked him, is you sure and everything? And he said he knew, I guess Gil thought it might be, but he wanted to make sure that Malcolm was okay. Would he be able to do this case? And Malcolm says, like, yes, he's fine with that. So then, so Gil tells him, okay, I was thinking that it might have been a copycat, but I wanted to bring you in just to be certain, because he knew if anybody knew if they were doing a copycat, it would be Malcolm. So Malcolm goes home, and his mother is there, and she's telling him, like, she's pretty much happy that she was like, I'm happy you got fired. He doesn't tell her that he's working for the NYPD, but she tells him that she's happy he got fired and everything. You could tell Malcolm and him are from money, because that was one of the things at the beginning that they said, that the surgeon, they can't believe this serial killer came from this wealth of this family that has this wealth, this prestige and everything. So you could tell they have money. And so his mother is like, I'm glad you got fired, and maybe you could do something else. And so when she finally leaves, Malcolm starts to dig into his father's profile, because he needs to know everything so that he can find out who the killer is for this case. So then the next scene, we see that Malcolm is at the coroner's office, and we meet Risa, who's the coroner, and she's very bright, and and you could tell she's smitten by Malcolm and everything. So if he might not get along with JT and Danny, but he gets along very well with her. So then with the women, she tells him that they were all into BDSM, but the markings that they had were like 3 days ahead of time, not current or whatever. And he was like, that's interesting. And she was like, yeah. So whatever, so you would think that at the time of their death that they would have the bruises and everything for the BDSM session, but because they thought, well, maybe they did that to them while they were, while they killed them, but no, it was ahead of time. So it was like, so all of them had to have seen the same person or whatever if they were all into that. So to find out that the person that they went and saw was Nico. And so they're thinking, okay, well, if that's the person, then he's probably the killer. They probably set up another appointment, because earlier when Malcolm was giving his profile, he said this is not who she expected to come. Like, she was looking forward to he didn't know it was BDSM, but he was like, she was looking forward to a session with someone, or a romantic night with somebody, and the person who came is not the person that was supposed to be there. So they think Nico is the one who is, because all three women had sessions with someone named Nico. So they're like, okay, this has to be our killer. So of course they go and try to track down Nico. So They knock on the door, no one answers. So then Bright calls because he got Nico's information out of the phone number out of the file, and they can hear the phone ringing, and then the abruptly someone cuts the phone off. So like, oh, somebody's in there. So they bust in, right? And when they bust in, they see all these surgical tools, and they see this the concoctions where he's drugging the women, because the women he drugs them and everything, and then he tortures them. So as they see all of this, lying around, and then they hear moans, and so they pull the curtain back, because it was a big plastic like curtain thing, and they pull it back, and there's this man there, and they were like, oh my god, he had another victim. So they take they were looking at Nico. Well, we don't know it yet, but that is Nico. So they were looking at the victim, and they were like, and he looks at Danny, and he points his eyes to the side of the room, and she was like, the killer's still here, and he was like, yes. So as he does that, the killer comes through shooting at them. So they crash down on the floor, and the killer takes a run, and they tell Danny, go get him. So she runs after the killer, and so that leaves JT and Bright to try to go into to try to get the person out of, because he's handcuffed to the chair, the victim. And then they undo his mouth, because he had like a gag or tie around his mouth. So they undo it, and they were like, Nico did this to you? And he said, I'm Nico. That guy forced me to call those women again. And so we find out that he's Nico, and the man has been impersonating him. So when the women thought they were having another session with Nico, but actually he forced Nico to call, and they were having another session with him, who ends up being the killer. So then we see that they look under the chair, because they're trying to, because he's handcuffed and everything to the chair, and they're trying to get him out of the chair, and they see, oh my gosh, it's a bomb. So because of that, they're like trying frantically, and because the bomb is starting to count down, because as the killer is running away, he activated it and everything. So they're trying to get Nico out of the chair, but they don't have the key, they don't have anything, so they can't get him out. And so JT is like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Because the bomb has got to go out, and they're gonna, they can't take him, because Nico is the bomb, so there's no way to save him. But they can't stay much longer, because JT is like, it's going down, Bright. What are we going to do? And y'all, Bright saw this axe, and he says, and the look in his eyes was like he was gonna enjoy this. He's like, I'm gonna chop off your hand. I'm gonna chop off his hand. Go get some. Before he says that, he tells JT, go get ice, lots of ice. And so JT is like running to go get ice, and he's like, what we gonna do? And Bright is like, I'm gonna chop off his hand. And Nico is like, excuse me. I mean, it's not funny, but the way Nico was looking, like, we all would be like, no, you're not. But so Bright picks up the axe, and he runs over there to Nico. And as they're doing this, Danny is chasing the suspect, but he gets away. And she tells, Gil pulls up, and she tells Gil that the suspect got away, but JT and them are back there with a victim. And then as they do this, there's a big explosion in the building, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's the building that JT and them were in. And so, but then they see JT, Bright, and Nico running, and he did chop off Nico's hand. I thought maybe like he was just saying that, but he really did chop off that man's hand. But he got the hand and everything, so Nico was able to get away. So yes, he got his hand chopped off, but I mean, he's alive. So I mean, like, okay. So then we see, so then we go to, okay, so then they changed the profile, because when they first went into the thing, Bright realizes, oh, my profile is wrong. So he says, this man is like 40 to 50. He's rich. He's bald. And so he's giving his profile to JT, Gil, and Danny. And then Ainsley calls his sister, and she tells him, listen, you got to help me with mom. Like, get here now. And so he's like, he has to go, but he gives them the profile. So then we see Malcolm is having dinner with his mom at his mom's place, and his mom knows the name of and he tells her like she finds out he's working on the case and everything, and they tell her the names. She knows all the names of the victims, like her father had, his father had murdered, because the killer is duplicating, the murder that his father had done with the three ladies. And she remembered all of the names and everything, which shows that even though she's just this prissy woman, she's very high society and everything, that did affect her. Having her husband doing all of that. Um, and she tells Malcolm, whatever you do not go to your dad for help. She was like, if you're gonna work on this case, she doesn't really want him working on it, but she says, but if you do work on it, do not go to your dad for help, because that's like opening Pandora's box. So then we see Malcolm has a flashback, and we show that Malcolm was talking to his dad, and he sees okay, so he's talking to his dad, and then he stops talking to him because he's going to bed. But on his way to bed, he hears this moaning, and he's like, what is that sound? So he goes to the area where he hears the sound, and he's calling his dad's name. But you know how you're walking away and you're kind of like, Dad, what is... But he's not saying it too loud, so I guess his dad couldn't hear him calling out to him. But so he opens like this trunk box. It's like a big trunk box, and when he opens it, there's a woman inside and everything. And and that's the flashback. Oh, so he opens it and there's a woman inside, and so he takes off, like in his dream, because he's at the precinct sleep at this point, just taking a nap. So in his dream he takes off running because he's a little boy. So because that's why he, I guess, has the restraints and everything. So in present time, he sleep in the precinct, and I guess Gil's office or somewhere, and the door is open. So he gets up and he starts screaming and taking off running because he's not in present mind. He's having a night terror at the precinct. So when he does that, Danny had already been trying to call out to him and walk towards him, but he couldn't hear her, so to wake up because he was having a night terror. And so when he runs out, he smashes into her or whatever, and he starts trying to fight her to I guess run away, and she's holding on to him and trying to get him to wake up. And so all the police officers are pulling out their guns and everything because they're like, what's going on? And she's telling them, no, don't shoot him, he's asleep. And she's trying to get Bright to wake up, and he finally wakes up, and she's just reassuring him that you're okay and everything. So then, y'all, so then we see he and Gil are talking, and Gil is just like his wife Jackie. I guess, I don't know. I guess she's deceased or divorced. I don't know where Jackie is now. But he said she was always worried about Malcolm, and she cared a lot for Malcolm. So you see that their relationship, he and Gil's relationship, goes way back, but we don't know at this point how far. So he tells he tells him that he asked him, is Danny okay? And Gil's like, no, she's tough. Oh, that's what happened. He was like, no, she's tough like Jackie from the Bronx. And that's when we find out that Gil's wife's name was Jackie. Or is Jackie. I don't know. They don't really go into details about her. And then he tells him that, his dad had sketches of the, because Gil says these are sketches or something that they had for the killer or whatever. And he was like, that's my dad's work. And he was like, what? He was like, yeah, those belong to my dad. So that makes, of course, Malcolm be like, I gotta go take these to him and ask him, how did the serial killer get your sketches? So he goes and sees his dad, right? And he confronts him. He's like, of course, his dad is like, oh my gosh, Malcolm, because it's been 10 years. And he's like, oh my gosh, he's happy to see him. And I like that way they do the character in this. Like, they don't make his dad like this creepy. Well, I mean, it's creepy, but they don't make him like this serial killer that is just so quiet and he's brooding. They don't make him like that. Like, they actually make him like he's almost the comic relief in this show, because like his little things that he says and his quirkiness is almost funny, like some of the things he says and everything. So he's like, oh, Malcolm. Anyway, so Malcolm confronts him. It's like, how did the killer get these sketches to know, how to do these women or whatever? Because they're yours. And he was like, I don't know. Like he was like, the book is here. And so they opened up the book and they were gone. And he was like, one of your patients did it. So then they start going through. For some reason, he got his patients files. And first of all, his prison cell is amazing now. Like they have the library and everything in there for. Like his prison cell is not the average. Like it's not the bars and all that kind of stuff. They've advanced, upgraded his cell. But anyway, it's kind of like on the Handmaid's Tale when you like, why is the commander now in prison like this? But anyways, so he tells Malcolm he doesn't know, and so Malcolm is like, I'm gonna find out. Give me your case files. And so like all the people you worked with, and so he goes through all his dad's patients and everything, and he narrows it down to two. Because at first his dad was like, you're never gonna be able to find out who did this by, because his dad knows, he knows who's done it, but he won't tell Malcolm because the only way he wants to tell him is if Malcolm agrees to continue to stay, keep visiting him, because he really like he loves his son. It's weird and all that, but he loves his son and everything. So Malcolm is just like, I'll find it myself and then go from there. So Malcolm says, someone stole, he told him that someone stole them from him, and he narrows it down to two people when he gets the case files. And he says, which one of these two people is it? And his father finally tells him which one. And I think, like, the reason I say that it's funny because he was like, they stole my files or whatever. I can't believe they stole it out of my book. And Malcolm was like, 3 women died because they stole it. And he was like, there could be more outrageous than just, the one. There could be several. Because it was like, Martin was like, there could be more than just one outrage. And that's why I'm like, he's kind of like the comic relief of the show. So anyways, Malcolm figures out who the person is. So Malcolm and Danny go to the party because his wife is hosting this big party. So they go to the party and Danny confronts the wife and she takes Danny upstairs. And so upstairs she confesses to Danny that she was having an affair. And I was like, Danny, don't go up there with her. Because I thought she was trying to set Danny up, but she really wasn't. She really wasn't. Because her husband comes in and he knocks her out. And then he knocks Danny out too. So he knocks them both out. And he's about to kill his wife. And so we find out that the killer was a patient of Martin's, and he is upset because his wife was having an affair. So they're in this BDSM relationship, and she's not supposed to be with anybody else. I guess he's supposed to be her dom, but I guess he's gone all the time. So she found Nico. And so he found out about this, and I don't know why he killed the other 3 women. I guess practice for when he was going to get to his wife. So they go through all of this. They go through, him talking, because then Malcolm comes in. So Malcolm is just like, don't, because he's got this poison or whatever that could kill them. And Malcolm is just like, don't hurt them or whatever. Because Danny tried to, stab him in the leg, but she missed or whatever. So Malcolm's just like, kill me, So he gives him his arm to the murder. Because at this point, we found out the murderer. So he gives him the arm, and the man is just like, he didn't want to do it, but when he finds out that Malcolm is Martin's son, then he's more intrigued to be like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it now. So he tried to do it, but Gil and them came in just in time. And Danny was like, you weren't really going to let him poke you with that, like kill you, because that would have killed you. You weren't going to let him do it. And Malcolm's like, no, that would be crazy. So then we see that, it's all wrapped up. They got the killer and everything. So JT Bright are talking to Gil, and they're like, Gil, he is the serial killer's son. And he was like, what is the deal? Why did you bring him on? Excuse me, my sinus. And he was like, okay, back in the day, I got this call, and they said it's a prank call from a kid or whatever, but just go and check it out. So Gil goes and checks the call out, and he finds out while he's checking it out, Martin answers the door, and Martin's like, I don't know who made that call, but come in here and, have a cup of tea or something. And Gil's like, okay. So he goes in, and so he's standing in the foyer, but he's looking at but he's looking at Martin make the tea. And Malcolm comes to Gil, and he tells him, you need to pull out your gun. And he's like, what, kid? Like, what? He said, my dad is going to try to kill you. And he's like, and he just tells him that he was the one who called the police and everything. And so Gil takes heed to what Malcolm is telling him, and they find out that that's how they found all the information about, that. So essentially, Malcolm turned Martin into the police. That's who told the police that his dad was a serial killer, because remember, he saw that body in the trunk. So then we see that Malcolm goes back to Malcolm goes back to Martin, and he just pretty much tells Martin he's done. He's not going to help do anything else with him. And Martin was like, no, we could be a team. We could help each other with murders. And Martin tells Malcolm that, and Malcolm's just like, no, I'm done, or whatever. I'm good. So that was the first episode, the pilot episode. Now we get into season 1, episode 2, called The Annihilator, and the prodigal son called The Annihilator. And Malcolm had a dream about the woman in the treasure chest, and he flashes back, and as he's getting so he has the dream about the woman, and it's the same thing we saw in this last episode, where he goes up to the chest, he pops it open, and he sees that there's a woman in there. And what happens is his dad comes up behind him, and he remembers his dad like putting medicine, like putting a cloth over his mouth. So we see that his dad has drugged him in that he's drugged in that moment to make him go to sleep. So then we see him flash back again, and there's no woman in the box. So after the police come and everything, he looks and he sees that, where's the woman? There was a woman in the box and she's not there. And Gil, because this is little Malcolm at this time, Gil tells him, your dad was going to kill me, and thank goodness like that you said something, and because he would have been dead, because his dad knocked his victims out by giving them a cup of tea or something, so they would drink this, and I guess then they would get woozy and drowsy and everything, and that's how he got them. So then flash forward to the present time, his mom calls and wants him to meet her for lunch. She's like, I got the driver outside for you, come on. And he's like, I don't really want to meet for lunch, I'm busy. And she's like, are you planning on eating sometime today? And he was like, yes. And she said, well, then you can have that meal with me. Come on, meet me for lunch. So he gets there, and we see them at lunch, and it's him, it's Ames, and his mom and everything. And his sister leaves because she gets a message from her job that there's some kind of quadruple murder, homicide that has happened, and she tells him, I gotta go. So she leaves the table, so that just leaves Bright and his mom there. And so she's just like, pretty much, she's just going in on him like, are you talking to your father? Are you doing any of this? And he's like, no, I haven't saw him in 10 years. And he still has that tremor that is there. And especially when it comes to talking about his father, the tremor gets worse, or he gets agitated about his father, the tremor gets worse. And she's just pretty much telling him, stay away from him. Like, don't let him back in, because you know what could happen if you let him back in and everything. And then he gets a text message and everything, and it's from Gil telling him about, come down and meet me. And so she was like, I guess you're going to go with the NYPD or whatever with Gil. And so he gets up and leaves. So then, and she also talks about the nightmare. He tells his mom about the nightmares, and he tells her that it's not just a nightmare. Like, he knows that there was a woman in the box, and she says, no, there was not. They looked, there was no woman in the box. And it's just a night terror. It's just a nightmare, a night terror. It's just your imagination. He's like, no, I know there was a woman in the box. But, so that's one of the, things I wanted to talk about on that. So then he gets up and leaves, and he goes and he meets Gil. And Gil tells him, so when he goes and meets Gil, it's Danny there and JT there, and he's like, oh, he put the team back together. And Gil is just like, listen, before we get into this, are you okay to do this case? And he's like, yeah, 100%. And Gil was like, I would have believed you if you said 90, but at 100%, I don't believe you. But, he needs Malcolm to profile because he's one of the best profilers that he has, so he needs him on this case. But he also is concerned about him mentally as well. So they go in, and before they go in, they show his sister as a reporter, and I was like, she's kind of terrible, but that was just side note. So then, so they go in, and we see the murder has taken place. So we see the father at the head of the table, we see the sister and brother on one side, and the mother on another side, and Malcolm detects that. He says, okay, so this family didn't get along, and this was an obligation meal because they each have their, how in your family you just share, like, salt and pepper, bring it here, but they each had their own condiments. They don't share one. They each had their own personal one. So he was like, so you can tell that it was an obligation there. They're not even eating the same meal. Each of them have their own separate meals that I guess whoever cooked had to cook for them. I would hate that. Like, listen, y'all about to eat the same thing today. But so they each had their own separate thing. And they said, why? And so he goes to Aristo, who is the father that's been murdered, and he says, why is he the only one that has his mouth sewn closed? Like, he was the only one like that. And so they were like, I don't know. And so he was about to touch it, and what's her name? Edrisa comes up, and she's like, they do their little flirt thing, and JT is like, oh, I'm about to go to the car. And so they do their little flirt thing, and she tells him, yeah, they were poisoned. And so Bright looks at it, and he's like, yeah, he made Aristo watch his family die because the family is tied up, and they find out they were killed by poison. Someone poisoning. And so he was like, and look at the handprints and everything. He made him watch while the family members died and everything. So then she said, Edrisa tells him there was a puncture on Aristo. And he says, why is that? And she said, I'm going to do, some research and everything, and I'll let you know. So she cuts the thread from Aristo's mouth. And when she does that, Malcolm gets a phone call. And it's an unknown caller. So he goes and he answers the phone, and we find out it's his dad. So his dad is talking to him and everything, and he's just like, how you get my number? And he was like, they gave you a cell phone or something? And he was like, no, I got phone time. And since it looks like nobody's been calling him, he's got plenty of phone time. And I guess the guard has helped him, which is the same guard. If you look at the first episode, it's the same. He's had the same guard all these years. I guess they give him his own personal guard. But anyways, so he's telling him, I want to help you with the case. I saw that going on. And Malcolm is just like, no, we're not going to do this. So he's busy talking to him. Gil is busy because he knows something's up with that phone call. So Gil is busy watching Malcolm. And Edrisa is, she's doing her thing in the back. And then, so she comes back around and she looks. And, so you see Edristo's jaw start moving. Like, his throat started moving. I'm like, oh my God. I was thinking, oh my gosh, he's still alive. Somebody should see that he's still alive. But then you keep looking and you see this snake head come out of his mouth. And I was like, what? And so then the snake starts coming out, and Arisa, she's trying to say it, but she's so terrified and probably shocked by what she's seeing. She's just like, snake. And so she finally gets it out right as Malcolm is hanging up on his dad. And by this time, there were three snakes. There are three snakes that have come out of his mouth or whatever. and they're like, lock this place down and everything, and somebody, Gil said, hurry up, tell them to hurry up and get here. And so Danny tells Teresa, come over here with me, and she says, I can't, there's a snake on me. And so then Malcolm goes to her and he says, don't move. And she says, he asks her how she's doing, and she says, I'm frozen, like I can't move. And he says that, and then he just starts talking to her, telling her that's your brain protecting you, because when we see snakes, it tells us to freeze or whatever, because snakes don't like movement. I mean, because if you're not moving, a snake can't, I guess, detect you or whatever, or they won't bother you. So then okay, what then happens? So then they're like, what are you doing, Bright? And he was like, oh, I had snakes as a kid or whatever. So he gets this like cloth that was like a dinner napkin that was on the table, and he's just talking to Teresa, and he starts waving the cloth because he was like, they don't like movement, but when you do move. And then the snake looked at him and he attacked, like he lunged at him, and then that's how they got the snake off of her and everything. And she faints in his arms and all that good stuff. So that was that. So then, sorry. Okay, so then we see his mom keeps. Oh, so then we see he's getting ready for another day's work, and his mom is calling him, but he won't pick up because he don't want to deal with her right now. Like, he got a lot going on with this murder case, and then having to deal with his father, and then he don't need the pressure of her talking about, don't be with your father, don't be with your father. So he's like, I can't deal with this right now. So then the next thing we see is that he's made it to work, and they're in this, I guess, they're in this room going over the case. And JT made some kind of smart comment, but they've all kind of, he and both Danny have been making smart comments about Bright this whole time, and his father and all that. So I didn't know why this was such a big deal, but anyway, they hash it out about Bright, and he says, yes, it was weird growing up with a serial killer as a father. Yeah, his dad is, a sociopath, but he is not. He just put it all on the table for them. So then they could move on. They talk about that. So he gives the profile, and he says this person loved the family, and he wanted to be a part of the family. He said you could tell because because of the way he killed them all, and he made Aristo watch. So whoever this is a family member. So they're like, okay, let's look to see if there's another child out there, or if there's another person out there that's super close. So they do, and they find that there is a son named Liam. And they said, okay, let's go get him. So Bright, JT, Gil, Danny go and track down Liam. And as they're walking up to him, he closes the trunk, but not before Bright can see, like, he had like a case that would contain snakes. And so they tell him, they were like, when was the last time you spoke to your family? And he says, we're not that close. It's been years since I spoke to them. And Gil was like, I hate to be the one to tell you this. And then Bright just busts out, they were murdered. And so they're gauging his reaction, and he seems shocked and everything, but again, they were not close. So he's just puzzled by that, and he was like, so y'all don't know who did it? Like, what's this about? And they were like, yeah, we're trying to find out, because they were murdered by these exotic snakes, because the snakes were poisonous. And he says, excuse me, that, it's so much. And then Bright, he says, oh my gosh, no, I wouldn't know anything about like exotic snakes or anything. So then Bright says, like, look at those gloves you got. Those gloves you got on are pretty fancy, and they're really hardcore or whatever, because they were snake, for handling snakes and everything, or animals and everything. And he said, oh, I just need a minute. And then he takes off running. I'm like, Liam. So he takes off running, and he runs into a building, and Gil tells Bright, because Danny and JT go in, and Gil tells Bright, who's about to run too, he's like, no, don't you come in. Stay outside. So they go in, and they're like, what's that noise? What's that smell? So it's all these different animals. And so of course Bright had to come in. So he comes in and he's like, oh, he's running an illegal exotic animal trade, black market for animals and everything. Um, so then he find okay, so they split up in this thing because it's a lot of space to cover. And of course, Bright is the one who finds Liam with no gun or nothing on him. And so he tells Liam, we just want to talk. Liam throws one of the poisonous snakes at him. Danny comes, she hears him shuffle because Bright falls. So she hears the shuffle and she comes running, and Bright points her in the direction, and hanging on his arm is the snake. And he was like, oh no, it's a little one, it'll be okay. But it wasn't because he fell out. And so Danny's just trying to talk to Bright. She's like, Bright, stay with me and all that. But anyways, they get him to the hospital. So when they go to the hospital gives him drugs. Now, the reason he doesn't, I guess he takes medicine, but he doesn't take things that will make him go to sleep. Bright. So he's telling, he wakes up because he's been having these night terrors, and he finally got to wake up from, I guess, one that he had. And the nurse runs in and she's like, oh my God, he's awake. And he was like, what did you give me? And she was like, you need to calm down and all that. And he was like, he's like, what did you give me? I need to be awake. He was like, I don't want to sleep. He needs to be able to wake himself up from the night terrors and everything. So that's that. So then we see this discussion with Liam and the lawyer for the family that's deceased, who is representing, with Gil and the lawyer who is representing Liam, who represents the family. Even though he's not in the family, he's still going to represent him. And he tells Gil that Liam was willing to talk, but he wants immunity for his black market stuff. And Gil was like, I have one of my own in the hospital because of him. They would have talked to him, before or whatever, but now, no, we're not gonna do that or whatever. And so he tells the lawyer, I know you try to protect your client, and the lawyer makes it clear he don't care about Liam. He loved the father, that the father was his friend, but he's just doing this out of obligation, trying to protect Liam. So then we see Malcolm's sister Ames comes to visit him, and they just talk, and she says they don't even understand how you're awake. And he was like, what they gave me, I take that in my morning coffee. And she was like, that's not funny. And he's like, no, I don't take anything. He says, because I need to be able to wake up. Like, he doesn't want sedatives that will put him to sleep like that. And she says, when did this get worse with Dad? And so his phone is in this Ziploc bag, and she says, you have 17 missed calls from someone. Who is it? And he doesn't want to tell her. So she gets the phone and she listens to him, and they're from his dad, just blowing him up. Because y'all know he was blowing him up. Just blowing him up, blowing him up, blowing him up. And his dad actually gets agitated because he wants to help with help him solve the case. He just wants a connection to him. And so, but anyway, so they're all from him, and she's like, does Mom know? And she was like, no, Mom couldn't know because you would be in the morgue. And he was just like, I got it under control and everything, just like, I guess he's just like, everyone butt out. Like, I got this or whatever. So, but then he tells her, and she believed, like, out of him and his mom, out of her and his mom, she listened to him when he told her there is some missing time from when I found that body to when I called the police. So there's time missing in there, because when he was asleep, he had another vision of his dad taking him out, like drugging him, and then going to sleep. And he sees his mom come in the room and everything. And his dad's like, oh, he was in my hobby room and all that kind of stuff. And his mom was like, is he okay? And he's like, yeah, he's okay. And he's trying to tell his mom, but he's drugged. His dad drugged him. He's trying to tell his mom there's a woman in there. And then you see his dad put more drops on the cloth to go ahead and knock him out. And he tells Ames that the only person that can help him figure out is his father. He needs to talk to him. And so on one hand, she doesn't want him to, but on the other hand, she knows it would help him or whatever if he does. Um, so then Malcolm goes and visits his dad because he wants to find out the complete truth. So when he goes and visits with his dad, he tells him, like, did you drug, like, you drugged me because I don't remember the time frame. And his dad is like, that stuff is dangerous. I would not drug a 10-year-old because that, was dangerous or whatever. How old was he? Like something like that. He's like, because that is dangerous, so I would never do that. So, like, don't be, like, he was pretty much like, don't be an idiot. I wouldn't do that to you or whatever. And he was like, nope, there's time missing, and then I know you know. And he tells him, well, I mean, your mom, ask your mom, the police, everyone says that there was no body or whatever. There was no woman in a trunk. There was no woman. And he was like, nope, I know there's a woman. So he's about to leave, and then Martin talks about the case, and he was like, he must have really loved his family to do that, to do that to them. And then they start talking, and Malcolm tells Martin that wasn't love. You didn't kill us. He was like, no, I loved y'all enough to have you or whatever. So then Malcolm starts thinking about his profile, and he was like, he starts realizing that the Annihilator or whatever has to be an illegitimate child that wanted in the family, and he couldn't get in. So that's why he tortured Aristo. Is that his name? I don't even remember that at this point. That's why he tortured him by making him watch all the other people die, because he wouldn't let him in the family, and everything. So then the dad is like, oh my God, are we solving the case right now? And Malcolm was like, I gotta go. I don't know. The dad is funny to me. He's funny. So then Malcolm calls Gil, and he's like, there's an illegitimate child out there, and we need to find this child because that's who killed this family. And and they're trying to make Liam take the fall for it. And Gil is like, listen, Liam took a huge fall because he jumped 12 stories from his father's building. Okay. And so Malcolm's like, what? So Malcolm goes to the crime scene, and he can't believe it because Liam is there on the floor, on the ground, dead and everything. And so he tells Gil, no, this can't be over because I know for a fact that he didn't do this. Like, he was not the one to kill him, and everything. And they were like, whoa, there's an illegitimate child who did it, and they're making Liam take the fall. And he says, I know. And Gil is just like, no. Brass is telling us to wrap this up. We're about to wrap this up for them. And he was like, listen, you can't do it because he wasn't the murderer. The murderer is still out there. And then Danny comes, and she's like, there were some payments made, and it seems like they were made to the Annihilator or whatever. And so Gil is like, I'm going to give y'all a few hours to check this out. Go to the lawyer, find out who those anonymous payments were made to, that Aristo made and had the lawyer do. So they go to the lawyer's house, which is Littman. They go to his house, and he's doing a barbecue and everything outside with his family. And so he has 2 children there playing around. His wife is back there. He's grilling some burgers. And they come and they ask him questions, and Bright starts to realize he's nervous. Like, he's like, why is he nervous? And so they're asking him questions about how he felt about, did he hear about Liam? And he's like, yes, I heard about him. And so they're talking to him and everything. And Danny is just, so his daughter keeps coming up like, Daddy, we're hungry. And he's like, okay, let me get these burgers and stuff. He's like, give me just a moment. My family is starving. Let me go feed them. So he goes and feeds his family. And Bright has got this perplexed look on his face. And Danny's like, what's up? And he's like, he fits the profile. Like, he's the right age for a illegitimate child. He's very protective over Aristo. Like, because they said something about Aristo wasn't a good father or whatever. He was like, don't talk about them like that. The man is dead. Like, acting like that was it. But you could tell that upset him when they said he wasn't a good father. So anyways, he comes back, and I guess they want us to think that they've been eating for a while because they've been asking him questions, because the little girl comes up and she says, Daddy, can I play on the swings or something? And he's like, did you get enough to eat? And she was like, yes. And it felt like that was like right there, but we're going to go with it. So Bright and Danny look at her, and Bright noticed that she has, what was it? What's it called? Vigolato. Is that how you pronounce it? Oh, I can't remember. I wrote it down, but I can't even read my notes. Sorry. But anyway, she has this discoloration on her face, the same as Aristo. And Littman says that's a family trait. Aristo had it as well, and he said, "Yeah, you would know, but, like, that is a family trait because you're his son." And so they confront him about being, the son and killing the father and killing all the family and everything because you want to end, and he didn't acknowledge you. Like, what happened when you told him? Did he even know? And Littman tells them that yes, he told Aristo after years of working for him. He finally told him yes, and he thought he would be proud of him, want to embrace him. He said he told me, here's a check for 50,000, get out of my life. So that's where the payments had went to. So it's like he gave me that $50,000 check and told me to get out of his life or whatever. And he had resentment because he loved his father, but his father didn't want to acknowledge him. So they are like, let's just go down to the police station. We'll take care of this. Your family never has to know. And Lippman's like, oh, they will never know. And you could hear, Bright was listening to the girl, I guess, swing on the swing. And then all of a sudden, you don't see her on the swing anymore. And Danny turns around and she's like, Bright, because the little girl has fell face down into the grass. And then they look, and the daughter and the wife are collapsed on the picnic table. And they look at him and they were like, sir, you poisoned your family. Because he poisoned the other family as well. And they were like, you poisoned your family because you didn't want them to find out. So you killed them. And he was like, you killed them when we came up. You fed them poison. And I guess he inhaled the poison because he started drinking a beer. So I guess that's how he inhaled the poison. And he just collapsed. So Littman just collapses on the ground. And then Danny's like, oh my God, what do we do? And he was like, and so Bright is like, well, they stopped his heart. He stopped his family's heart last time. So so we need to inject them, to get the heart going. And so she's like, I got a med kit in the car. So they get the med kit. They inject them all in the leg and they all survive. And the man, he goes to the man, Bright does, and Littman is like, I don't want to live, I want to die or whatever. He says, I know you do, but he injects him anyways. And so that's the end of that story. So we found out who the killer was. So then we go to Bright is drinking with Gil or whatever, and they're talking about everything, and Gil just wants to know that Bright's gonna be okay, and Bright's like, I'm gonna be good, like, stop worrying about me. So he's taking his meds. The people gave him meds, and he's taking this drink, and they're not mixing. So he's drunk. He got drunk quick off one drink. So Danny has to take him home, and she sees all the restraints, and he asks her, was this the weirdest thing she ever seen? And she said, no, not in the least bit. And I'm like, maybe she had something in her childhood that had went on. But anyways, so that was that with them. And then we see that Bright has more dreams about the woman in the box and everything, and what his dad did. And he's convinced, like, he drugged me. So he goes to his dad and he tells him, I know you drugged me. There's more information, but I know there's some time missing. What happened? And so his dad is like, well, what do you think? What happened in that time? How long was it between the time you think you saw a woman in the box and you called the police? Was it days, weeks, months? And Bright said, I don't know. Like, you're coming into him for information or whatever. And he was just telling him, he told Bright, let it go. Some things you don't want to know, just let it go. And Bright was like, don't worry, Dr. Whitley, I think his last name is Whitley, I'm going to find out. And he leaves, and his father, Martin, tells him, good for you. Now stay with me here, because then Bright leaves, right? And the security guard, David, who's been with Martin this whole time as his, I guess he's his personal, guard assigned to Martin. He calls Jessica, who is the, Bright's mom. He calls her and he tells her that he was here again. And she was like, really? He visited again. He was like, yeah, he just left. And she was like, thank you, David, for telling her. So he hangs up with her and she just drops her. She throws her phone on the ground. She's enraged that he's there or whatever. And I'm like, that's a weird reaction. that's a weird reaction. And the fact that his dad is like, some things you don't want to know. And then when Bright says, I'm going to figure this out, and he tells him, good for you, I'm like, okay. So, stay with me here. Stay with me. Do you think that it could possibly be that the mom knew something about it and she wasn't telling? Like, because there was a woman in the box. We can clearly tell. Now, they're not showing the woman's face that was in the box. Could it have been the mom? Like, they had some kind of weird game that they were doing it? Or, I don't know. That's my thoughts. But anyways, that's the Prodigal Son, the episode 1 and 2. Now I can start reviewing it every single week because I'm all caught up on it now. So I'll just start reviewing it every single week. I actually have to watch this on Hulu. I watch it on Hulu, so it'll always come out on a Tuesday instead of on that Monday night. So just look for it on Tuesdays. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe.